Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. We've got one more theme from Valiant Smashers for us to cover, and we've saved possibly the most unique of these specimens for last. See, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has had a lot of cliches that permeate its 25-year run, and a particularly persistent one has been the dichotomy between light and shadow. How they oppose each other, how they mesh with one another, and how good and evil don't always map themselves quite as cleanly onto those two as we'd like to think. But even now, the game is finding new ways to recontextualize this age-old conflict by dipping into a very pervasive cultural touchstone. How do you make a deck with two divergent paths, with one leading to creation and the other destruction? Well, that's simple. You distill the moral spirits of good and evil into little shoulder creatures that influence your every decision. So get ready to be of two minds about some very important things, because it's time for Valmonica Explained. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons and the fine people over at Dragon Shield. If you want to protect your cards with the strongest scales on the market that even come with their own lore while supporting the channel, use my affiliate link in the description. So what's the deal with Valmonica? Well, we've got some dark fairies and light fiends, but we don't get very many, because in the broad strokes, the theme is more about gaining life points and dealing damage to yourself. See, our main deck monsters are two halves of a pendulum scale, so you're meant to get them all situated, characterized as putting one on each shoulder, then go about resolving your numerous spells and traps, which will either cause you damage or life point gain. Each of your shoulder gremlins are aligned towards one path or the other, so when you fulfill the task in their particular way, they get a counter. Get enough counters on a particular pendulum scale, and you gain access to their associated Link monster, which have some wild effects. Let's not waste any time and get acquainted with our conscience. Angelo Valmonica is a level 4 Dark Fairy Pendulum monster with 1200 attack and 2100 defense and a scale of 3. As a pendulum spell, while you have a Fiend monster card in your other pendulum zone, each time you gain life points, place a resonance counter on this card. And once per turn, when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can immediately after this effect resolves, Link summon a Valmonica monster. As a monster, if this card is in your hand, you can discard one other card to place both this card and Emony Valmonica from your deck to your pendulum zone. And during your main phase, if this card was normal or special summon this turn, you can banish a Valmonica normal spell or trap card from your grave to apply that spell or trap card's effect that includes gaining life points when that card is activated. And because they're so closely intertwined, let's take a quick peek at Emony Valmonica. It's a light fiend with a scale of 5, but otherwise has the same level and battle stats. It also has a similar pendulum effect, requiring a fairy to be in the other scale, and gains a resonance counter whenever you take effect damage. It also debuffs all of your opponent's monsters by 100 attack for each resonance counter on your field. It has the same monster effect as Angelo to set up your scales, though in this case it actually sets up Angelo, and also has the same Valmonica spell and trap copying effect, though this time it copies the part that deals damage to you. So that's a lot to take in, but the idea is that all of your monsters are one card scales to get your engine going, and any subsequent copies that you summon can help you double dip on your spells and traps to help you get to that critical mass of counters that much quicker. And while the scales are very narrow, it does still allow you to pendulum summon your on-theme monsters, meaning if you can get them into your face-up extra deck, you can do this turn after turn for even more value. So when it comes to keeping your card economy healthy, these two are here to help you shoulder that burden. Next up, we have the reasons why we want to get those resonance counters in the first place. Odd Deity of Valmonica Monsters is a Link 1 Dark Fairy monster with 2500 attack, requiring only a single effect monster as material. That sounds pretty powerful, but you can only Link summon it if you have a Fairy monster card with 3 or more resonance counters in your pendulum zone. If this card is Link summoned, you can target monsters your opponent controls up to the number of resonance counters in your pendulum zone and destroy them. And you can remove 3 resonance counters from your pendulum zone to give this card a second and third attack during each battle phase this turn, and you can only special summon copies of this card once per turn. This is the payoff you get for committing yourself enough to the path of life points, and right off the bat it is a menace. At minimum, you pop 3 monsters, with more removal available the more resonance counters you've accrued. And then it just casually represents 7,500 points of damage all by itself. Pair it with a single other monster, and that's game over. Link 1s aren't supposed to be this strong, but Monsters takes that idea and really flips it on its head. Divine Oddity of Valmonica Zebufera is much like its counterpart. It's a light fairy and has a different link marker, but has the same link rating, attack, material requirement, and summon condition, though this time you need to have those resonance counters on a fiend monster card in your pendulum zone. If any number of cards you control would be destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can remove 3 resonance counters from your pendulum zone instead. And once per turn, as a quick effect, you can target one of your Valmonica normal spells or traps that are banished or are in your grave, and apply that spell and trap card's effects when that card is activated. So this is the monster you gain access to once you've dealt enough damage to yourself via effect damage, and is a much stronger turn 1 play than Guillarm, providing you with some destruction protection and giving you extra value out of your spells and traps that you've already used. It's basically a souped up version of our base monster's effect, but can be used during each one of your opponent's turns, not just the turn it was summoned, helping to keep the resources flowing, which is a skill that really resonates with our goals. That covers all of our monsters, and now it's time to take a look at our spells and traps, and we're going to lead things off this time with the deck's field spell, Angelic Demonic Selector, Valmonica. It has an effect where, when activated, adds a Valmonica monster from your deck to your hand, and if the third resonance counter is placed on a card in your pendulum zone, you can target a monster your opponent controls and take control of it until the end phase, but it cannot declare an attack. Which isn't much of a problem, because if you do this on your own turn, you can just link that monster off into one of your Valmonica links. Unless you took a normal monster, but in that case, you're probably still in the clear. This also helps get your game plan online, effectively acting as 3 more copies of your pendulums, helping you to build your scale if you need it, or get you access to your yarded spells and traps to accrue counters via more copies of your base Valmonicas. It really is a card that's instrumental to our success. Next, we have Valmonica Intonare, a normal spell card that applies one of these 2 effects, but if you don't have a Valmonica card in your pendulum zone, your opponent gets to pick. Either you gain 500 life points, then if you have a monster in your grave that can be special summoned, your opponent chooses one of them for you to special summon. Or, take 500 damage, then you can add a level 4 monster from your grave to your hand. It's a little rough that the better effect still has your opponent choosing what monster you get to pick, as it really does incentivize you to play nothing but pendulums to help keep their choices to just your link monsters, but a free monster is still a free monster. And if your Valmonica pendulums somehow end up in the grave, at least you have the damage effect to help get them out of there. So proper usage of this card is going to be very important towards setting the intonare of the rest of the duel. Valmonica Shelta is a normal spell card that works exactly like Intonare. The first choice is either gain 500 life points, then you can place a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck, and if you do, draw 2 cards. Or, take 500 damage, then you can add a Valmonica spell or trap card from your deck to your hand, except a copy of this card. Now, when it comes to setting up your resonance counters, the latter effect seems to be the superior one, because it lines up the next activation, but if you're already set up in that regard, it might be better to take the draw too. While it doesn't net you any additional card economy, it does help you look through 2 more cards, which can be a big game changer. That probably makes this the most context sensitive of the theme's choices, because the outcome can't be boiled down to just black and white. Valmonica Versare is another normal spell card with the same formatting as the last 2. The choices are between gaining 500 life points, then you excavate cards from the top of your deck until you excavate a Valmonica card, and if you do, add it to your hand, also shuffle the rest into the deck, or take 500 damage, then you can send a Valmonica card from your deck to the grave, except a copy of this card. This is neat because we have another instance of a Valmonica card that replaces itself, presumably as a way to help keep those counters going, while the other seems more fit to work with our pendulum monsters, effectively setting up any spell or trap card to get banished so you can copy that effect with your pendulum monsters. Though it can also get one of those pendulums into the grave so you can retrieve it with Intonare. I'm glad that we have more generators for our counters because of how important those are, but really, looking at these cards just makes me want to try whatever's in those glasses. I've always wondered what the condensed essence of morality tastes like. Valmonica of the Guiding Rhythm is a normal trap card that you can only activate if you control a Valmonica monster card, which means it even counts ones that are in your pendulum zone. You apply one of these effects unless you control a Valmonica link monster, in which case you resolve both in sequence. The first effect gains you 500 life points, then lets you destroy a spell or trap card on the field, and the second effect burns you for 500,
then you can return a monster on the field to the hand. This is pretty nifty, especially since both effects don't target, but it gets even better in the context of Zebufera. Once Guiding Rhythm hits the grave or is banished, that link can essentially copy its effects at quick speed to get you what amounts to back row and monster removal, all while letting you go net neutral in life points while still getting you 2 resonance counters. It's a card that's a little underwhelming at first, but that's just what happens when a theme gets made that pushes established boundaries and dances to its own rhythm. Valmonica of the Selecting Melody is a normal trap card that works exactly like Guiding Rhythm. Its first effect has you gaining 500 life points. Also, your opponent can't target Valmonica monster cards with card effects this turn, while the second effect burns you for 500, then you can negate the effects of one effect monster your opponent controls until the end of this turn. This is one I'm a little more iffy about, not gonna lie. It's another that gets a lot more value when used by Zebufera, but the problem is that I'd like to apply the targeting protection as soon as the turn starts. But my opponent may not have an effect monster worth negating at that time, meaning we have to wait a bit to take full advantage of it. And if your opponent targets a Valmonica before you do that, well then it's too late to begin the process of applying that protection, because it doesn't work retroactively. Seriously, we printed Skill Prisoner almost a decade ago and we've used it on 2 cards. Why haven't we utilized this more? Selecting Melody is still good for what it is if you focus on its effect negation half, but it still ruffles my feathers when we include effects like this, and I hope the design team starts singing a different tune soon. Alright, that's all the Valmonica cards, but what do we do with them? Thankfully, Jurarme has already given us a very substantial win condition. Just get it onto the board so it can attack a lot, and we win. And with all the tools we could ever want to actually get our scales put together, our big concern is going to be getting as many harming and healing effects as we possibly can to get the counters we need. So what can we play to help them out? Well, as it turns out, we've got quite a few cards that have powerful effects where the drawback is dealing us damage. The most prominent of these cards being Performages. Trick Clown will revive a Performage while slapping you with 1000 damage, and Damage Juggler can be really helpful in keeping your life points safe so that you're the only one messing with them. But the most ridiculous one that I found to be useful was Flame Eater. It burns both players for 500 damage when summoned, meaning that it by itself helps close the gap Jurarme couldn't get to by itself. And it's not once per turn, meaning you can summon this, link it away for something, bring it back with the Damage Juggler, and then deal 500 more damage. Blackwing Zephyros the Elite is also a pretty good card, as it'll reset your field spell so you can activate it again later. And because it deals damage to you to do that, that's a resonance counter. It also helps that all of these are level 4 monsters, letting you access the ridiculously powerful rank 4 toolbox. As for gaining life points, well, we don't have quite as many good options in that regard. Though with all the spells you'll be playing, Spell Absorption will get you plenty of instances of life gain for doing nothing at all. It even helps counteract the damage you take from your Valmonica spells and traps, so you never have to worry about evil-eyeing yourself out of the game. While you may never end up scaling them, the Draco Slayers fit into the level 4 Pendulum pool perfectly. They've got some wacky effects and even opened the door for running Ignistra Prominence, who is still one of the wackiest synchros in the game. Getting our hands on good Link monsters is also going to be paramount if we expect to have to go in for the long game. And by good, I mean ones with good Link arrows. Appaloosa has always been snazzy for its negation and arrow placement, and will do good work for us here as well. If we're running Performages, Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians, is a fantastic choice, especially with all the spells we'll have on hand to farm counters, which of course means we'll be able to summon the almighty Access Code Talker. Hallowed be thy name. You know another monster that works really well with links? Baguska! They're unaffected by its defense effect, so any opponent that isn't also link spamming is going to be in a pretty bad position while you reap all the benefits. As for a silly tech pick, this is one of the few decks that can fully utilize the power of Stained Glass of Light and Dark. Giving your opponent a discard outlet isn't always the best, but they still go -1 while you get to cycle through 3 cards to really shake things up. Now that I've covered everything I know about Valmonica, let's see how it stacks up against the Nova scale. Novelty. Of all the card types in the game, Pendulum has had to work the hardest when it comes to recontextualizing itself, as any new theme will likely get cannibalized and stripped for parts to add to the great big Pendulum pile. So, by necessity, Valmonica has to run a unique playstyle to stay relevant, and I think it succeeded here. The conceit of framing your actions as either helping or hindering shoulder creatures, feeding them until they're nurtured into large godlike creatures, all while using the pendulum scales as the place to set up shop is out of this world. This is an easy 5 in the novelty category for Valmonica. Objectivity. While the theme can be pretty powerful, a lot of that power is concentrated specifically in Jurorme, with everything else feeling like it kinda just durdles between cards to rack up counters. While I am fearful that at any point something is gonna break this pendulum deck wide open, currently I don't think it's gonna do much to shake the boat competitively, what with all the setup you have to do to get this off the ground. So for not doing too much to break the scene, I'm giving this a 4 in this category. Versatility. While nothing in this theme locks you out of any other archetype, the narrow pendulum scales do hurt the kinds of decks this can synergize with. This is good for balancing purposes, but not necessarily for deck brewing purposes. While we found a number of cards that help out regardless of this, i.e. performages, there really isn't a broad pool of cards that work well with them, which is arguably by design. Still, on purpose or no, it's getting a 2 in versatility. Awesomeness. Good theming and interesting mechanics go a long way with me when it comes to getting excited for an archetype, and Valmonica does that in spades. The premise is solid, the game plan isn't the same pendulum unbreakable board building, and it's just cute as a button. So Valmonica gets a 5 from me in terms of awesomeness, bringing these shoulder savants up to a 16 out of 20 on the Nova scale. And that's all I have to say about Valmonica. While I don't think it has the oomph necessary to crack the top tables, it's certainly one of the funnier rogue picks out there, utilizing the power of life point manipulation to do some truly heinous things. All you gotta do is set your scales, keep an open mind, and for the love of Raw, stop listening to the one that tells you to eat your opponent's cards. Wait until you get home so you can eat your own cards. You have no idea where your opponents have been. They might not even be sleeved. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Valmonicas leading you down the path of righteousness, or down the path that rocks? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out.
Today's episode was brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. When you want to protect your cards with the power of dragon scales, get some sweet lore for them, and support the channel, check out my link in the description to get started. Today's episode is also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander Green Knight, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajadel, Andrew Newman, A Random Pup, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Danny Bound, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iskander 711, John, Jordan, Julius Sneezer, Mana Charge, Marluxia Zagirl, Molly Renata, Nathan Vig, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Sir Knight JCB, Sky Buster Leo, Sophie, apparently, The Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Almento 5010, Aaron, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Masta, Blue Gem, Chaz Ghost, Chris Kessler, Corbinisms, Drakenwald, Eki Bullock, Emony, Eva Padilla, Hake Boyagian, Herbal D, In the House Like Carpet, Inblink, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Carp, Kevon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Matt Simmons, Mega Combi, Michael Shimabukuro, Nadia McCarthy, Nitromo, Ruxith Sarani, Shizuka Nijimura, Star-Lord 777, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, Tucker Ordorn, and Zal Dureka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, participate in monthly custom card reviews, and just keep the lights on in general, please consider becoming a patron by using that link in the description, or by becoming a YouTube member.
And if you'd like to see another theme full of light fiends and dark fairies, check out this video I made covering Despia. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.